Long before the first stone was laid, before the first coin was minted, there was only the river. The Thames was not the disciplined, embanked waterway we know today. It was a wild, tidal beast, spilling over its banks into vast, grey marshes. To the casual observer of the prehistoric world, this was a place of insignificance, a foggy edge of the map where the land seemed undecided whether to be solid ground or open water. Yet it is within this very indecision that the seeds of a global crossroads were sown. For centuries, diverse voices have echoed across these banks, shaped by waves of migration that have turned a muddy bend in the river into the most diverse city on Earth. But how did a swamp become the heartbeat of an empire? It began with the realization that geography is destiny. The river offered a gateway to the heart of an island, a natural highway for those brave enough to navigate its treacherous tides. This was a land of many voices, even then, tribal whispers, the call of water birds, and the silent potential of a soil that would eventually support the weight of millions. To understand London, you must first understand its fluidity. It is a city built on a liquid foundation, proving that even the most insignificant beginnings can, through the intervention of history, become the pivot point of the world. In 43 AD, the silence of the marsh was shattered by the rhythmic thud of Roman sandals. The legions of Emperor Claudius didn't come for the scenery, they came for control. With the cold, calculating eye of a Roman engineer, they identified the Thames' lowest crossing point, the place where the river was narrow enough to bridge but deep enough to harbor ships. Here they established Londinium. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a logistical masterstroke. Almost overnight, a frontier outpost became a swirling vortex of trade. Wine from Gaul, olive oil from Spain, and grain from the British hinterlands collided in a cacophony of commerce. The economy was built on the Roman appetite for expansion, and Londinium was the stomach. The culture was a fascinating hybrid. Roman villas rose beside Celtic huts, and the Latin tongue began to merge with local dialects. It was a city of migrants from its very first breath, soldiers from the Danube, merchants from the Levant, and administrators from Rome, all weaving a tapestry of urban life where previously there had only been reeds. Londinium was the first draft of the global city, a place where the pursuit of profit overrode the isolation of the island. However, the Roman dream was nearly strangled in its crib. In 60 or 61 AD, the fury of a displaced queen named Boudica descended upon the city. The Iceni rebellion was not just a war, it was an attempt to erase the Roman stain. Londinium was put to the torch, its inhabitants slaughtered, and the city reduced to a layer of charred red ash that archaeologists still find today. But London's defining characteristic is its refusal to stay dead. The Romans returned, and they didn't just rebuild, they reinvented. They encased the city in massive stone walls, the London Wall, portions of which still stand as silent sentinels in the modern financial district. They built a forum, a basilica, and an amphitheater, transforming a scarred settlement into a fully realized Roman metropolis. This was an era of stone authority, where the architecture itself was a message: we are here to stay. For centuries, the city thrived under the shadow of these walls, the economy maturing into a sophisticated system of taxation and international maritime trade, until the internal rot of the Roman Empire began to pull the foundations away. When the last Roman legions departed in the 5th century, the lights of the city didn't just dim, they went out. As the imperial infrastructure collapsed, trade died, and the complex systems of plumbing and law became memories. For several generations, Londinium became a ghost city. Imagine the sight: massive stone temples crumbling, vines choking the triumphal arches, and the Roman streets disappearing beneath a carpet of wild grass. The Anglo-Saxon newcomers, who viewed the massive stone ruins with a mix of awe and superstition, referred to them as the work of giants. They were a rural people, wary of the ghosts of an urban past. They didn't live in the city, they lived around it. The economy reverted to local subsistence, and the long silence settled over the Thames. This period serves as a haunting reminder that no city, no matter how grand, is immune to the tides of history. It was a time of total abandonment, where the river reclaimed its banks and the wild returned to the Forum. Eventually, the Saxon aversion to Roman ruins gave way to the undeniable logic of the river. By the 7th century, a new town began to flicker into life, but not within the Roman walls. They built to the west, in the area we now know as the Strand and Covent Garden, calling it Londinium. This was a wick, or trading town, and it thrived on a different energy than the Roman military machine. It was a commercial hub of timber and thatch, connected to the burgeoning markets of Northern Europe. The economy was driven by artisans, fishmongers, and small-scale traders. Londinium was a bustling, muddy, vibrant success until the horizon filled with the dragon-headed prows of Viking longships. The very trade routes that made the Saxons rich made them a target. The vulnerability of Londinium, an open town with no defenses, led to its inevitable downfall. The Vikings didn't just want to trade, they wanted to take. Prosperity had once again brought London to the brink of extinction. Enter Alfred the Great. Recognizing that the open sprawl of Londinium was a death trap, he made a strategic decision that would define the city's geography for the next 1,000 years. In 886 AD, he moved the population back inside the old Roman walls. He refortified the stone defenses, turning the ghost city into a burh, or fortified stronghold. This was Londonburg. The identity of the city shifted from a vulnerable marketplace to a defensive capital. This era was defined by a tug-of-war for power between Saxon and Danish rulers, a period of blood and iron where the city was the ultimate prize. The economy was now a wartime economy, centered on the maintenance of the walls and the support of the garrison. Yet within these walls, a new sense of English identity began to coalesce. London was no longer just a place to trade, it was a place to hold. The year 1066 changed the DNA of the city forever. William the Conqueror didn't just capture London, he intimidated it. He knew that to control England, he had to strangle London into submission. He began construction on the Tower of London, a massive stone keep that loomed over the city like a predatory bird. This wasn't a castle built to protect the citizens, it was built to protect the king from the citizens.
May our fortunes be as full as these tankards.
The Norman conquest redrew the political map, layering French culture and law over the Saxon foundations. Stone authority became the norm. The city became a place of stark contrasts, the royal power of the Tower and the rising spiritual power of Westminster Abbey. The economy shifted toward a more rigid feudal structure, but London's merchants remained stubbornly independent. This was the beginning of the city as a political entity, a place so powerful that even kings had to negotiate with its leaders. As we move into the 12th and 13th centuries, London becomes a labyrinth of medieval wealth. The guilds, associations of weavers, goldsmiths, and merchants emerged as the true masters of the city's economy. They regulated trade, set prices, and built magnificent halls. However, this wealth was built on a foundation of extreme fragility. The city was a dense thicket of wooden buildings, leaning over narrow, filth-strewn alleys. Fire was a constant threat, and disease was an invisible neighbor. The culture was one of piety and pageantry, but beneath the surface, social unrest simmered. The gap between the wealthy merchant class and the desperate poor was a chasm. The city was growing, yes, but it was a chaotic, organic growth that ignored the basic needs of public health and safety. It was a golden age of commerce, but one lived in the shadow of the gallows and the gutter. In 1348, the invisible killer arrived. The Black Death wiped out nearly half of London's population in a single year. The economy ground to a halt as fields went unplowed and shops stayed shuttered. But the plague did something unexpected. It shifted the balance of power. With fewer workers available, the survivors realized their worth. They demanded higher wages and more freedom. When the government tried to suppress these demands with the poll tax, the city exploded in the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. The common people, led by Wat Tyler, marched on London, burning palaces and demanding justice. Though the revolt was eventually crushed, the message was clear: London's people were no longer passive subjects. The city had survived the plague, but the social order had been irrevocably altered. A new, more assertive middle class was beginning to find its voice. The Tudor era was the moment London truly went global. Under Henry VII and Elizabeth I, the city underwent a seismic shift. The Reformation saw the closure of monasteries, freeing up vast tracts of land for development and shifting power from the church to the crown and the gentry. The culture flourished. This was the age of Shakespeare and the Globe Theatre, a time when the English language was being forged into a weapon of immense beauty. But the real story was the sea. The founding of the Muscovy Company and the East India Company turned London into the beating heart of an expanding empire. Ships returned from the Americas and the East laden with spices, silk, and gold. The economy was no longer just local or European, it was global. London's population exploded as people flocked from the countryside to seek their fortune in the City of Gold, creating a vibrant, dangerous, and exhilarating urban environment. Just as London reached its Tudor and Stuart zenith, it was nearly erased from the map again. First came the Great Plague of 1665, a final, horrific visitation of the Black Death that killed 100,000 Londoners. The city was a place of crosses on doors and bring out your dead. Then, in September 1666, a spark in a bakery on Pudding Lane ignited the Great Fire. For 4 days, the medieval city burned. St. Paul's Cathedral melted, and 13,000 houses were reduced to ash. It was a total reset, yet from the smoking ruins, a new London emerged. While the radical grid plans of visionary architects like Christopher Wren were largely rejected by stubborn landowners, stricter building rules were enforced. Brick replaced wood. The streets were widened. The Great Fire erases the medieval filth and forces the city into a more modern, organized material form. It was a painful, fiery rebirth. In the wake of the fire, London didn't just rebuild its houses, it rebuilt its mind. The 18th century was the age of enlightenment. Coffee houses became the penny universities, where for the price of a cup of coffee, anyone could engage in debates about science, politics, and finance. Lloyd of London was born in a coffee house. The stock exchange followed. London formalized its power, building the Bank of England and developing the complex financial instruments that would fund the British Empire. This was an era of infrastructure, the building of the first bridges across the Thames since the Romans, the development of West End squares, and the rise of a sophisticated administrative class. London was now the command center of global influence, a city of thinkers, speculators, and statesmen. Then came the steam engine. The 19th century transformed London into an unprecedented industrial metropolis. The population leapt from 1 million to 6 million in a single century. Railways carved through ancient neighborhoods like iron knives, and the first underground trains rattled beneath the streets. The skyline was dominated by chimneys, and the river became a toxic soup of industrial waste and human sewage. This was the era of the Great Stink, which finally forced the city to build the massive Victorian sewer system, a marvel of engineering that still serves the city today. The economy was a behemoth, driven by factories and the massive London docks, but this wealth was mirrored by abject misery. The East End became a synonymous term for overcrowding and poverty, a stark contrast to the opulence of the imperial capital. Victorian London was a city of deep shadows. Crime, poverty, and disease were the constant companions of the poor. The stories of Charles Dickens and the horrors of Jack the Ripper captured a city that was struggling to manage its own growth. However, this era also saw the birth of modern policing, the bobbies, the rise of public health acts, and the first real efforts at social reform. These weren't driven by pure altruism, but by a chilling necessity, the realization that the misery of the poor would eventually threaten the wealth of the rich through cholera and crime. It was a time of slow, painful moral awakening, where the city began to take responsibility for its millions of inhabitants. The 20th century brought the ultimate test of resilience: 2 world wars. During the Blitz of 1940-41, London was bombed for 57 consecutive nights. Thousands died, and iconic landmarks were scarred or destroyed. But the image of St. Paul's Cathedral standing tall amidst the smoke became a global symbol of defiance. The city was battered, but the Blitz Spirit defined a generation. The economy was redirected entirely toward the war effort, and the culture became one of survival and grim humor. Londoners lived in tube stations and emerged each morning to clear the rubble. The war didn't break London, it forged a new, hardened identity that would carry it into the post-war era. The decades following World War II were a period of post-war collapse and renewal. As the British Empire faded, London faced a period of exhaustion. The docks began to close, and the city felt grey and diminished. But then, a new wave of many voices arrived. The HMT Empire Windrush brought migrants from the Caribbean, followed by arrivals from South Asia and Africa. These new Londoners didn't just fill labor shortages, they injected soul, music, and a new cultural vibrancy into the city's tired veins. Social reform, the creation of the NHS, and massive reconstruction projects, often criticized for their brutalist architecture, attempted to build a new Jerusalem. The city was once again absorbing people and ideas, preparing for its next great act.
We're really excited about the project.
Likewise.
Starting in the 1980s, London underwent a radical financial and cultural resurgence. The Big Bang deregulated the financial markets, turning the City of London into a global powerhouse once again. The derelict docklands were reborn as Canary Wharf, a forest of glass and steel. The skyline was transformed by the Gherkin, the Shard, and the London Eye. The culture shifted from the swinging 60s to a tech-savvy, hyper-connected global capital. London became a playground for the world's elite, but also a laboratory for cultural fusion. From the Olympics to the rise of the Silicon Roundabout, the city proved that it could still innovate, still compete, and still dominate. Today, London stands as a living palimpsest. If you walk down a street in the city, you are stepping on Roman foundations, walking past a medieval church, standing in the shadow of a Victorian warehouse, and looking up at a 21st century skyscraper. The lesson London teaches us is that resilience is not about staying the same. It is about the ability to be destroyed and the courage to rebuild better.
It's amazing, I can see everything.
It is a city defined not by permanence, but by its incredible capacity for adaptation. It has absorbed fires, plagues, bombs, and economic collapses, and each time it has used the ruins as the foundation for the next layer of its story. The story of London is a mirror for our own lives. We all face great fires or long silences, moments where everything we've built seems to crumble. The advice London gives us is simple: don't fear the reset. When things fall apart, don't just try to glue the old pieces back together. Look at the marshland of your life and ask, where is the new crossing point? Use your history as a foundation, but don't let it be your ceiling. Be like the Londoners of 1666, mourn the loss, but start laying the bricks for something stronger and more fireproof. Before you go, I want to wish you and your loved ones a life full of health, resilience, and the strength to keep building your own story, no matter what challenges come your way. If you found value in this epic journey, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with a friend who loves history. Your support allows us to keep using AI to tell these incredible stories.